Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel. I'm the GCSE science teacher, and in today's video we're going to be learning about some new biology concept. This is a new branch of biology, no pun intended. It's actually plant biology today. So we're learning about plant organs and plant tissues. If you do find the video helpful, feel free to stick around and subscribe, join our community, and like the video. Share it with someone you think would also benefit from learning more. I am a real life science teacher. A few of you have asked me that. Yes, I actually am. I have an Instagram, I have a TikTok, which I use to post revision material for GCSE biology, chemistry, and physics, not only for my real life students, but also for any student who wants to get a better grade in their GCSE sciences. So if you want to be part of this community, please do feel free to. It's completely free. Subscribe and let's get into it. So, organization hierarchy. This is something that comes up in the exam in one way, shape, or form, whether it's a low stakes question at the beginning and they ask you to tick a box, or maybe they ask you to put in order of size some keywords. So let's just make sure we understand that the unit of life, the first unit of life is the cell. The cell contains lots of organelles and components which help it do its function. But when we have a group of cells, we actually call this tissue. And a group of tissues which have a similar function is an organ. Organs, when they work together with other organs, we call this an organ system. Things like the respiratory system, which is shown there, the circulatory system, the immune system, that kind of thing. We also have, when we have all these organ systems working together, we have what we call an organism, like a human or a plant in this case, like I say. And it's worth just being aware that plants will have their own organs, such as leaves. Plants will have their own tissues, like the xylem and the phloem. Plants are made up of cells, essentially, just like we are. So there is some similarities there, and it's worth just being aware of the different keywords and how they actually link with plant biology as well, because often students don't focus a lot on plant biology compared to the human biology that is quite often covered first in the course. So something to be aware of there. So at GCSE, they want you to know about the different types of plant tissue. And we've already talked about plant cells. We may have heard of the palisade cell or the typical plant cell that you learn at GCSE. We've also heard of root hair cells that are found in the roots of plants that are used to absorb mineral ions and water, whether that's through active transport of, or osmosis, respectively. We've heard about different types of plant cells, but you need to now know about different plant tissues, specifically the ones that are found within the leaf. I like to imagine the leaf is kind of like a sandwich. I say this to my students often, that there's lots of different layers to the sandwich. And if you remove one of those layers, it's no longer a sandwich that you'd probably want to eat. It would need all the different components to actually be the sandwich. So it's a kind of the same with a leaf. You need all the different components for that leaf to actually function the way that it does. And I'll talk about the structure of the leaf in a moment. But the different types of plant tissue you need to be aware of are, first of all, meristems. These are found essentially in the growing shoots and roots of plants. They have lots of stem cells that have the ability to specialize and differentiate. A lot of mitosis is happening there because they're growing at those tips of roots and shoots. Any of you who are wanting to do A-level biology, by the way, you will actually do a practical where you isolate those meristems and you can look at them under the microscope and see mitosis going on. Let me know if you want a video on that. I know this is a GCSE channel, but if you're interested in A levels, by all means, I do teach A level biology, so I'm more than happy to share any knowledge I have. Um, Anyway, you also have in the leaf, you have the epidermis layer. We have the palisade mesophyll layer. Mesophyll just means a tissue layer. And this is where photosynthesis occurs. I'll talk more in a moment. We have the spongy mesophyll layer, which has lots of air spaces, and I'll explain why that is in a moment too. We also have the vascular bundle that's made up of the xylem and the phloem. All of these are examples of plant tissue. And we have the stomata and the guard cells, which of course are cells, but we will talk about both what the stomata is, not necessarily a cell, but the guard cells are definitely cells, and there is a layer of them which makes them a tissue. So let's talk about each of these individually. Okay, so in the exam, you could be expected to identify and even describe different parts of a leaf. This diagram that I'm showing you is what we call a cross section. Essentially, we've chopped the leaf in half and we're looking at the layers that are found within. Like I said, the leaf is kind of like a sandwich. It has lots and lots of layers to it. And we're going to talk about each of those ones and how this actually helps the leaf function. You could get asked to write an extended answer for this particular part of the course, maybe a 6-mark question, something like that. So if you are unsure unsure of how to approach 6 mark questions, if you often find that you leave them blank or you don't even know where to start, please let me know down below in the comments. I'm more than happy to create an entire video about tips and tricks for you that I have given and provided my students in real life for 6 mark questions, especially at the end of an exam. So let me know. More than happy to do that. Just comment down below in the comments and I will make that for you. So anyway, the leaf itself is an organ. It's made up of different tissues. The top layer is called the epidermis, just like our skin is called the epidermis, the top layer at least. Essentially, the epidermis is a protective layer for the leaf to protect it from the outside environment. Remember, plants grow outside often, and they're exposed to the weather, different climate, animals, that kind of thing. So the epidermis is a protective layer. It also has what we call the waxy cuticle, which essentially prevents water loss or transpiration. Remember, water is very important and vital for photosynthesis because it combines chemically with carbon dioxide to produce glucose and oxygen. So that waxy cuticle prevents any water from being lost. We also need to know that the waxy cuticle in the epidermis is actually transparent, and that allows the light energy to penetrate into the next layer, which is composed of the palisade mesophyll. And the palisade mesophyll sounds really scary and complicated. When I say this to students, they're like, huh? What is this? The palisade mesophyll is just a layer of cells or tissue essentially made up of palisade cells. Now, palisade cells, you've seen this before. It's a typical plant cell. Okay, we give it a fancy name because we're scientists and we love to do that. But a palisade cell essentially has lots of chloroplasts inside. These are these specialized organelles which are responsible for containing the green chemical, the green pigment called chlorophyll. That chlorophyll is used to essentially capture the light energy and utilize it to synthesize glucose. Remember, photosynthesis uses light energy from the sun. Now, the palisade mesophyll is vital for photosynthesis. If it wasn't there, first of all, the plant wouldn't be green because there'd be no chlorophyll, but there'd also be no photosynthesis. So that palisade cell needs to be right at the top layer. Underneath this palisade mesophyll layer, we have what we call the spongy mesophyll. Again, mesophyll just means kind of like a layer of cells, a layer of tissue. And the spongy mesophyll contains lots of air spaces, just like a sponge would. If you look at a sponge, you'll see it has lots and lots of air holes inside. And these air spaces are essentially to allow the plant to transfer different gases as they are exchanged in and out of the leaf. So plants need carbon dioxide for photosynthesis. That carbon dioxide comes from outside in the environment, in the air, and it comes to the palisade cell. It goes to the chlorophyll, the chloroplast. And it does that by transferring itself through and moving by diffusion through the air spaces of the spongy mesophyll. As the oxygen is created from photosynthesis, it is released back out of the palisade mesophyll layer from the chloroplast through the air spaces and out of the leaf. Now, where does it go from the leaf? It actually goes in and out of the leaf through a very special channel or a very special pore or opening called the stomata. Now, the stomata is not actually a cell or a tissue or anything like that. It's just an opening which has two cells around it called guard cells. Now, those two guard cells have the ability to act like guards. They essentially decide whether carbon dioxide can come in or oxygen can come out, depending on the conditions around the leaf. And I'll talk more about that in a moment. But essentially, it's a hole, it's an opening, and the guard cells can open and close that doorway into the leaf and allow carbon dioxide in and oxygen out. We also, by the way, have something called the vascular bundle, which I didn't mention, but the vascular bundle essentially is a network of fibers which contain the xylem and the phloem. These two components help transport different substances around the leaf and around the plant in general. And I'm going to talk about those in a minute as well. So at the GCSE, you need to know about the vascular bundle, and it depends on what level of study you're doing. So if you're doing higher combined or triple science, you'll need to know a little bit more about these two structures. But foundation students, you also need to know the basics of what they actually do. So I'm going to cover all of this in this slide. On the left-hand side, you can see a cross section of the stem, and this contains the vascular bundles. You can see we've got a vascular bundle, which essentially is made up of the xylem and the phloem. Now, what are they? The xylem, first of all, is essentially like a tube, like a straw, that sucks up water from the roots, from the soil, and moves the water in one direction to the rest of the plant. And like I said, water is vital for growth through photosynthesis. Okay, water is needed to combine with carbon dioxide to make that glucose and oxygen. Now, it's important that you notice the things that I've put in bold because these are all worth marks in the exam. So the xylem essentially moves water, but also mineral ions that are dissolved in that water in a one direction from the roots all the way to the stem and the leaves. Remember, the leaves are what contain that chlorophyll, so that's why the water is transported there for photosynthesis. The mineral ions, remember, will move through active transport, but water moves through osmosis. That's something to be aware of as well. The xylem itself, like I said, it's kind of like a straw, but you can't say that in the exam. It's just a visual for you. What you can say, however, is that it's made of hollow tubes and it's strengthened by this chemical or this material called lignin. And essentially, that helps maintain its structure. And we can say that the water that's transferred, we know that it moves through osmosis, but essentially it moves in this idea of the transpiration stream. So, what that means is as water is moved from the roots, from the soil, up into the stem, it can move out into the leaves and it can actually be evaporated or transferred into the environment. We call this transpiration. It can actually go from all the way from the roots up to the stem, into the leaves and out. And we call that the transpiration stream, this stream of water that's flowing through the plant and out into the environment again. That is a concept that you'll need to be aware of. However, there's next to it, there's another vessel that actually transports another substance called glucose or other dissolved sugars. You don't need to necessarily know the other types of sugars, but an example could be fructose, for example. Um, Glucose is the main one, but essentially what happens here is the phloem transports this dissolved sugar in two directions. Remember, the glucose that's created in photosynthesis needs to be transported all around the plant for respiration to provide the plant with energy for growth and repair and things like this. So essentially, the difference here is that the phloem will transport that dissolved sugar in two directions from the leaves, which is where it's created. Those sugars are created there, up to the rest of the plant, around the other parts of the leaves, and down to the roots as well. So there's two directions here. The movement of this dissolved sugar is called translocation. We are relocating that glucose quite literally. And this is done through the phloem, which is made up of elongated cells. That's the key phrase you need to use. And you can see that in the structure, we have lots of almost like flat discs that are running through those channels. These are called end walls. And inside, there are some pores that essentially allow the glucose and dissolved sugars to move in and out of. What I would recommend when you are revising this is to look at the mark schemes for your particular exam board and see what phrases they like you to use for the marks. These are more, these are general terms that would get you marks in all of your exams, whether you're doing AQA, OCR, Edexcel. But I would very much advise that you look at your particular exam board. Let me know in the comments, by the way, if you're OCR, AQA, Edexcel, or something else. But this is what I would recommend you do to highlight the key phrase. And that way you can definitely revise the key terms that will get you the marks. But this is a generalized overview that should get you those marks as well. So I know I've talked about stomata before, but I think it's important, especially if you're doing triple science or higher combined, that you know that stomata can be affected by guard cells depending on the environment that the plant is in. So in the nighttime, often plants will actually close stomata by swelling up the guard cells by allowing guard cells to absorb a bit more water and cause that closure of the stomata. And this prevents water loss. Remember, water can be transferred through a vapor in the environment, so transpiration or water loss can actually occur through the stomata as well. So at nighttime, those plants will actually close the stomata and the guard cells will swell to do this. Some plants will actually have some adaptations to prevent water loss further by having less stomata. And they also may even open their stomata at nighttime to actually prevent water loss in the day. Because remember, water is vital for photosynthesis, but plants will obviously not want to lose any water depending on the temperature as well. So these are some adaptations to be aware of. And transpiration as a whole, especially if you're doing higher combined or triple science, you need to be aware of how transpiration can actually be affected by different factors. So, temperature, if the temperature gets way too hot, transpiration will increase. Humidity, the humidity just means the amount of water that's in the air. And imagine if there's lots of water around a plant, that means that there's a lot of water available. That plant is not going to necessarily need to lose water. So, transpiration, the rate of it will be less. The wind, if it's a very windy day, if there's a lot of movement of air, that means that transpiration can also increase as well, and water can be lost there. And light intensity. If the light intensity increases very much, that means that the rate of photosynthesis is increasing and therefore lots of water is needed. So the plant will actually need a lot of water and doesn't want to lose any through transpiration. So a lot of the time the stomata will close. Something to be aware of, they could ask you, is why plants wilt as well. And this is because of the loss of water from the plant, because a lot of the time water has been lost through the cells, and those cells have lost their turgidity, and that's why the plant appears to have wilted. If you want to look at some exam questions about this, I highly recommend that you do, because they could ask you for data interpretation. They could give you some exam questions which have expected you to look at an experiment that was to do with transpiration and plot it on a graph, or to work out the mean average stomata count and why that has happened. I can do a whole nother video on this if you are interested, so do let me know. And that is something that I can make in the future. Just let me know. But that's it from me for today. So thank you so much for your time. I've been the GCSE science teacher and you have been curious. If you did enjoy the video, give it a like, share it with someone else you think would also benefit from learning more. Like I said, if you want to join the community here, just click subscribe, click the bell notification so you don't miss any videos. I know lots of you are starting your GCSEs or are midway through, you're in year 10 or year 11, and best of luck for those if you have mock exams in the new year. I cannot believe we are almost at the end of 2023. If you want me to do any further videos that will support you for any mocks that you have coming up, or you want to learn a bit more about maybe a physics, biology, or chemistry topic, just let me know down below in the comments. I also have an Instagram and TikTok at the GCSE Science Teacher as well. So thank you so much for your support on those channels and those different platforms as well. In the meantime, though, have a fantastic day and I will catch you in the next one. Take care.